No, yeah, you
Just
can hear
checking.
me?
Yeah, but when you share a video, you usually need to tick that little box.
We're not gonna watch a video. We're just gonna talk
Okay.
about it. People can watch a video when they want to watch a video.
Just checking. Okay, okay. Right, let me just copy the link over on YouTube. Voila. Okay, well, welcome everyone to Neuroccino on this Monday morning. Today we have a little new category, it seems, which is discussing a video. But our team was so excited by the paper that Ma presented 2 weeks ago and then Cesare last week that we're still riding the consciousness train this morning. Quickly, the rules, everyone is welcome to present a paper, a book chapter, or a video they got excited about, and we discuss it to the best of our knowledge. The only thing we ask you to not do is showcase your own work during Neuroccino. And that is it. Now, without further ado, today we have Michel talk about a YouTube video he got really excited about.
That's right. So I watched this video, I watched his channel, The Pursuit of Wonder, which is a philosophical channel where you have in 5-10 minutes videos, fundamental explanation of the reasoning which is behind a philosophical thinker. And I watched this video about consciousness and artificial intelligence, and I was like, oh, what a great video that will match what we've been discussing during the last Neuroccinos, which were like, are plant really conscious and what is consciousness? So I do encourage you to watch a video. I'm just going to summarize it here without like all the fancy details that the video will give to you to make it like more approachable by the general public. So the video really describes 3 mental experiments, 3 situations where you got to put yourself to try to delineate better the consciousness and how we can be fooled by what we observe. So the first experiment, mental experiment, is called the Chinese room. It's something that's been invented by John Searle. And the idea behind the Chinese room is, so you find yourself locked inside a room with absolutely no contact with anybody for a long time. And at one point, one of the experimenters is asked, who never met you, doesn't know you, is asked to send you letters. So you just leave like a little letter under the door. And so you're very excited because this is your first contact with somebody, and you open the letter, but the letter is written in Chinese. And unfortunately, you don't read Chinese, but you have the chance to have in your room this book that show you typical sentences in Chinese and how you should reply to those typical sentences in Chinese, writing the pictograms of what you should reply. So because you have all the time you need and you never had any contact with anybody, you start trying to find in your book what the person has been writing and writing back what the book tells you to write back without fundamentally understanding what you're saying. And you start by doing so an exchange, une conversation with this experimenter. So what's interesting is the experimenter, through this interaction with you, because you reply in the most appropriate way, start to really like you and eventually fall in love with you. And so this triggers a question whether really, if you give the knowledge to a machine to reply and give you exactly what you expect, you might fool yourself imagining that this machine is conscious. And in the reverse way, if you're studying an organism that is smart or intelligent, but doesn't give you what you expect or what you're looking for as being intelligent, you might think this organism is not conscious. And so this is interesting because this Chinese room challenged like the principle of functionalism, which is you can actually study consciousness by observing the way you interact with the world outside. And it's also challenged the idea of computationalism, that we think that the brain functions like a computer. So there seems to be something essential more than this knowledge, which is a book that is required to really give consciousness. And we can easily fool ourselves thinking that something or somehow somebody can be conscious, while they're actually not, because they're not actually aware of what they're saying. They're just giving you what you expect. The second thought experiment is called the Mary's Room. It's from Frank Jackson. And this experiment is trying to build on what is actually knowledge. And the idea of this experiment is that an individual, or eventually yourselves, born inside a room completely deprived from any color. So they use a special light, so everything is black and white, and they never ever had any contact with colors. However, inside this same room, you have all the scientific papers, all the book, all the knowledge about what is color, what does it do in the brain, how would you represent it, all the description written that this person has her entire life to read and understand and learn. And so at one point, this person can get out of the room and get its first contact with color. And the argument will be will it be the same or will it be different? Does having the entire knowledge of what is color and how does it feel is the same as experimenting this color thing? And this is an important representation of things that demonstrates that to really develop the knowledge about the world and the knowledge being required to be conscious, you need to have this physical interaction with the world, which is maybe not possible with machines and will be completely different for plants with the interaction that they can have with the world. Finally, the last thought experiment is taking the questions the other way around, imagining that a crazy scientist took your brain and put it in a little bit like in the Matrix, inside a bowl full of nutriment and just stimulated. It's just your brain. It's just stimulated from time to time by electrodes to keep it alive. And in that case, from the perspective of the experimenter, you're just a brain and you have absolutely no interaction, but those stimulations inside your brain created an entire world of hallucinations and sensations that you develop to keep your consciousness alive. And you're aware of yourself, but people around you are not aware of your consciousness due to your simple condition of being in a brain and a bowl. And this is interesting as well, because it actually demonstrates that some things can be conscious, but just because you cannot observe the behavior and the interaction with the environment, then you completely missed it. And so those are the three thought experiments that are described in this video, probably much better than I did. But actually make you delineate the complexity of what the consciousness might represent and how you can measure it, knowing that we have limited ability to define words and our understanding is limited, and the realm of how things can be conscious or not conscious of things is actually much more vast than we thought. That's it.
Great, thank you.
open the debate with this.
Oh yeah, okay. Whoa. Victor, was that a question or just a reflex?
That was a question.
Okay. In that case, you were first. Go ahead.
Thanks. It was not that much of a question, more like, as you say, a discussion, comments, and stuff like that. Because among the three videos, I think the one that is the most interesting, at least to me, is the first story about the Chinese room, because the other two are either the Mary's room. I think it's kind of flawed in the way it's described, at least in the video, because I watched the video, saying, is it the same that knowing about something and experiencing about it, basically, knowing perfectly about it or experiencing it? And I think it's obviously not the same, because it's not the same pathways that we use. It's not the same thing that even the brain works in a different way between knowing and experiencing.
Well, not really, because there's like a wealth of research argument that demonstrates that watching people dancing or doing something activates the neural network of dancing, for example.
Sure, because like mirror neurons and stuff like that.
Exactly.
But
I get your point. I'm not against it or whatever.
No.
Yeah, just like
I'm not saying. Yeah, the thing is,
from the neuroscience point of view, I was and that's why the experiments are interesting. They really work onto how, seeing something or reading something can actually activate the same network as doing that thing. And that's
but still, it's kind of fundamentally different to how the brain works. I mean, to me, it sounds. It's not really comparable. The only thing that in Mary's room, the only possibility that she would have had to actually experience colors without never ever seeing them would be some kind of hallucination, where you have like you take drugs and you get some
dreams
and dreams also perfect, but dreams, you're not typically you don't have like a typical conscious. Well, you could argue with drugs you don't either, but anyway, yeah. So there's that. For the third video, the third story, it was the one with the brain in the vat. Yes, and this one, the question about can we see consciousness, or can you, from the point of view of the brain, can we know if we are in the actual world or not? I think it's what we can call a hard question, at least right now, because we don't have the answer. It's like in the Matrix, as you said, you can't know if you are actually in the real world or in the simulated world, if it's perfectly done.
For us, but like let's take and for the plants it's like a complex question, but let's take the machine. If there was like some kind of trap consciousness, you should have some spontaneous activity happening within the network of the machine.
I mean,
in the absence of stimulation. I don't know. That's what I saw when I saw the movie, the video.
Maybe it's hard to say exactly, because if we can create a consciousness that works on demand, kind of, we can shut it down and shut it on, and it would work different. Why not?
No, I don't know. I'm asking the question.
But yeah, for the first, just coming back to the first story that I think is maybe the most interesting, at least to me, the Chinese room one. It's something that I think is there is a bit of a not problem, but something I want to discuss about the way it's set up. To me, in this story, the human that is in his room is actually kind of having the role of the sensory motor part of the brain, basically.
Right.
And our sensory motor, if we just take this part of the brain, I would say that they are not conscious by themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so we are putting all the consciousness in the Chinese room experiment. We are cutting out the semantic and comprehension part of our brain with the sensory motor part, and we are making some kind of chimera of a brain that would actually be interesting to see. Probably something that is close to what we can have with someone with some deep lesions between these kind of things, and it would be interesting to see what would happen and what does probably happen in people that have such lesions between different aspects of their brains. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if you can see they have a lesion, it works because you have this limited interaction. So you got to keep people isolated in the room, because if you see somebody that is injured and you can assess the full wealth of interaction you can have with this person, you won't be fooled. But in the case of the room, because the door is closed and you never see the person, it's almost like a perfect metaphor for the black box. You can attribute like a lot of what is happening into that is actually not, such as being conscious and being able to do it. It's a lot twisted, but actually there is a conscious person in there. but I found the first experiment is probably the most beautiful of the three.
I leave the floor.
I think Leah had a question before Chris.
I was just going to check, Leah.
Yes. So mostly referring to the first experiment, I was thinking, what's the role of emotions in consciousness? So like this experiment, okay.
Well, in that case, it's really the fact that the experimenters start liking and kind of fall in love with the person that is in the room, demonstrate that you projected onto this person the fact that it is a real person, even though that could be just a machine that is replying without understanding really what is going on. And so here, like, the emotion is the observation of how a person is full of the consciousness of something that is not.
So maybe it's a projection of backwards emotions, because you cannot have like some expression, memory. Just a paper.
Yeah, it's just to trick us into the way we can believe that something like a plant or a computer or an algorithm is intelligent or conscious. It's just like, a way to demonstrate that we can fool ourselves very easily.
But if we add another layer in this experiment, so this person in the room never fall in love before, so should this person be able to fall in love just with that paper?
That's the experimenter, not the person in the room that is falling in love.
The experimenter.
The person outside the room that is falling in love with the person inside the room. Despite the fact, because she receives answers to letters that are like always appropriate. And the person in the room actually doesn't know what she's writing, because she gets the books that says, well, with those pictograms, you write those pictograms, and that's fair.
Okay, so maybe I was confused. So if both the people never experienced that before, is it possible by new, like just with this paper?
All right, let me explain again. So the person in the room doesn't speak Chinese, doesn't read Chinese, but has a book with pictograms. Like, if you get this pictogram, you write this pictogram, and everything's fine. And reply to the experimenter who speaks Chinese and write real letters with meaning and get the answers with the meaning. So meaning is only monodirectional. Just the experimenter know what she writes and understand what is wrote back. The person in the box, as a metaphor for computers, doesn't know at all and doesn't understand at all what she's right, what, let's say, because that's confusing, what is writing inside the room. And this leads the person that is outside to project some form of consciousness onto the person that is inside. And fall in love, thinking that, projecting that this is somebody that is very well educated, nice, maybe funny. But at no time the person inside the room was aware or knew what they were doing, demonstrating the absence of consciousness of the mechanism, which would be just sensory motor here.
Okay, so I don't know which are the probability that the person fall in love with.
There's not a story of probability. It's
Yes,
just
yes.
it's a mental experiment. There is
Yes,
no.
yes.
I don't know if they will really fall in love in that case, but that will be the demonstration that we actually, this person fooled herself. The machine could have done the same job.
Okay.
Chris.
Thanks. Yeah, so about the first experiment.
Everybody likes the first experiment.
What?
Yeah, that's the best.
It's the best. It's the best.
I also have comments about the last one.
Okay.
So about the first experiment, for me, it's more like you're just displacing the actual consciousness. I mean, it's been said, but it's just someone wrote. Basically, someone wrote letters instead of the participant, and the person, the experimenter, just doesn't know who is the actual writer. But there is a consciousness, so you can't. I think you can't really use that to say. Well, you can use that to say you can be fooled, but you can't really use that to say, oh, something that is not conscious can be conscious in a way, because in that case there is actually a consciousness. So you don't have. There is a consciousness that wrote these answers in Chinese.
Yeah, I hear you, but isn't that what was the debate like? For example, for the plants, we did observe the way plants interact or care for each other, and interpreted that as meaningful messages.
Yeah, but in that case, we interpret. So yeah, we can be fooled, but if there is no consciousness that made it appear conscious, that's a little bit of a different problem, isn't it? Because
that was just, it's just a thought experiment, and it's silly because it's actually a conscious person doing the experiment. But so let's take the computer. Like, you've probably seen like those artificial intelligence humanoids that there is now in Japan that are replying.
So I was about to talk about that, because some people actually fell in love with artificial intelligence, and I don't even think we can talk about artificial intelligence in that case, because it's I saw a documentary. This guy is using this. It's a video game where you basically have a virtual girlfriend, but it's not really artificial intelligence, because people wrote the artificial intelligence or the machine learning algorithm to be lovely.
Okay.
So
I hear you.
The machine learning algorithm is not trained to have a normal discussion. It's trained to be nice to you in a way that you might fall in love with. So it's
totally
actually exists already. So that we can for sure be fooled by what appear to be consciousness, I think.
But then it is not conscious in that case. But I've seen like the video of like this it's like an artificial intelligence in a humanoid body, and she was giving this conference, and it just had like a citizenship. I think it's South Korea or Japan, as as a real person. But then you can kind of see the string of like what has been learned, how to reply to question and answer. So can we really say that this thing is conscious? And if that's the case, it's really conscious. Maybe all the things are conscious, you just don't know how to communicate, which will be the last experiment. And living this nightmare, being trapped.
So about the last experiment, it made me think of, there is a novel, I think, from Daniel Dennett. And I saw that in a French video from Monsieur Phi on YouTube. And he's basically translating, there are for sure videos about So it's Daniel Dennett. He wrote this novel where I think there is a nuclear accident and they can't send anybody, and they don't have robots for whatever reason, but that's part of the thought experiment. And they take this guy and say, oh, we're going to take your brain, put it in a box. It's going to be wired to your body, but remotely, because your body can resist the radiation, but not your brain. And there is a bunch of things that happen. And it's you should see, at least see videos about it. For the French speakers, Monsieur Phi on YouTube, and for the others, maybe I can find the link of a video about that in English.
Yeah, that's
and it's very interesting because there is the case of consciousness. Like, are you still? So there is this. Are you still the same person? But then if you copy the brain, because you're basically sending electronic and electric signals to a body. So you put a machine interface to a brain. So it's not a human anymore.
No.
But it's still conscious because it's a brain. But then there are other, it raises so many questions. It's so interesting. So yeah, I leave you on that.
I'll think about it. A lot of
I also just shared a book recommendation of a book that I read not too long ago called Machines Like Me, which is a story about a humanoid robot that is basically integrated into someone's life and what comes with it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that's an interesting read. And I shared the link. Also wanted to throw in the show, I think it's called Upload on Amazon. That also goes into the direction of what is consciousness, where you can basically upload your brain's content and continue living a life in the cloud. And again, it's a bit about the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I thought this crowd might be interested in it. Ma, you have a question as well.
Yeah, well, it was much more a comment, but your discussion made me think, for example, about our relation with pets, like animals, dogs, cats. I think it's more like the Chinese room, like probably we are attributing them some kind of consciousness that is not present on them, like, he feel like I'm sad, so today is being more nice with me, or these kind of attributions that probably are not present in them, but it doesn't mean that they are not conscious. So it's like the person who is writing these letters is conscious, but is not conscious of the content of that person is writing. And a cat or a dog can be conscious of many things, but maybe is not like conscious in the way that we attribute to them, like a person. So yeah, I still think that there are different ways of consciousness, and it's true that we attribute our what we know about consciousness, our experience of consciousness, but it doesn't have to be like that for all the species. So I think that. And also about your discussion about if it's the same experiencing something or learning about it. I think there is a thin line between them, because if regarding dreams or imagination, you can recreate the whole everything, like what you feel, your neural activation. So I don't think it's sometimes so different to feel something, to experience something, or to imagine or dreaming that thing.
That's a good argument. I read a lot about New Orleans, and then I visited it. I have to say that that was nothing less than my expectations, but but there was still something more being there and experiencing it than just imagining it. I guess you have like you might have the reverse effect when you read a book and you see the movie adaptation of the book, which is a little twisted because it's actually a fiction being taken as a reality, but you're always kind of disappointed, or most of the time disappointed, because that doesn't fit what you've been imagining. But again, this is not the reality. So there must definitely be something more to physically experiencing something rather than knowing about it. Besides the fact that knowledge is limited and language is limited, even if the language was perfect and the knowledge was absolute, there is probably something more there.
I mean, if by language we could just project our own experience to the brain of others, then there would be no difference. But that's more than science fiction then.
Yeah. Well, still, projecting how you experience it, and you remember how you experience it, or projecting directly as you experiencing it.
Both, why not? That would be fun to see the difference.
Yeah, in an MRI scan.
Yeah, in 1,000 years.
Chris, you had a
about experiencing the things. For me, it's a little bit of a non-question because we just don't have the same sensors. So language, when we speak, we use sounds and a little bit visual as well. But then if you read it in a book, you don't have any of that. And so it works for the color blue or whatever color, but it would also work with how does it feel to be touched by someone else on top of your head if your head has never been touched by anything before, like you had a helmet your whole life, and you want to explain to the person how it would feel to be touched on your head, but it would work with all our senses. It would work with pain as well. Like if you've never felt pain in your right ear, and you try to explain it, it's an impossible task because we are not even talking about the same systems. And in your brain, it would activate another part. So you could explain anything. And it's lucky that we have mirror neurons to actually project what we see in our own minds to try to copy it. But still, the mirror neurons are not in the same place as the sensory things that we feel. So it's an impossible task.
But can you really mirror something that you never experienced?
Yeah.
Just based on its description.
I think the mirror neurons are just an approximation, so it's good to learn and train, but it's never gonna mimic the actual.
I guess if you never experience it, you don't have the networks for it. So how can you mimic this experience through the mirror neurons?
Yeah.
But if you never experience it and then you experience, you can build the networks for it potentially.
But that will be the first time, so it will be different than knowing about it. And this is where you have the true new experience about it.
Yeah.
Ma also wants to jump back in.
Yeah, just to say that I think there are many things that you don't need to experience to understand how it will feel. Like, for example, maybe you need to have experience with pain, but if you see an operation or you see someone being tortured, you don't need to okay, I want to try to be sure how does it feel. Like, I know that it feels like terrible, and I can see myself there, and I can and you are not able to stand like watching at it, because you know exactly how will it feel. So for example, with this or in a dream, I wake up many times like crying or screaming because something is happening in the dream, and it makes you feel exactly like, well, I don't know if exactly, but in a very similar way, like in the real world, like this thing is happening in the real world. So I think this is an ability that humans and some animals also have, because if you need to experience everything to know how does it feel, this is not adaptive. So I think we have this ability to, by some observation or by some experience, you can generalize and feel like how it has to feel.
I think that it's possible to, as you said, to do this kind of thing, to extrapolate how it would feel. But as I said, I think it's basically extrapolating from our own experience. So you need to have some prior experience and to be able then to project how it would go in a different situation. But if you take a baby that has never experienced anything, it will have some things hardwired, and that would work for some stuff. But most of the complex experience that we have, if you put that same baby in an adult body and ask to react properly to project itself in some kind of situation, because it has absolutely no experience, I don't think it will be possible.
I don't know. I think there are some things that are like intrinsically to us. If you give a baby that has never experienced a food, it will eat. It doesn't. He or she doesn't need to know how to eat, because he or she will do. Or yeah, or the same. There are some animals that react with fear to other animals.
But that's pre-wired.
Yeah, that's hardwired.
Circuits. So you have, like, for example, they did that with chicks, and they know which berries are poisonous and the one that are not poisonous, even if they're raised separately from their parents, because it's hardwired from birth. But the knowledge of and I see how we can use dream to do things that we cannot do in real life. It's great, but we're still elaborating and making association between things we know. But if there is something that we absolutely don't know, then maybe we cannot dream about it.
There's a question from Nicholas as well.
Yeah, hi.
I
arrived a bit late, sorry, but I actually really liked the 3 examples you gave. And for the question of consciousness, I think, in fact, the color experiment, I think, is really powerful, because, I mean, today we discussed of many layers or levels of consciousness, including a bit the Turing test, like what would fool a human when they see a machine performing, or the capacity of having internal complex representation of the external world, and all that does not require consciousness. But to me, consciousness, my understanding of it is it's something very simple, is reacting to pain versus experiencing pain. This simple difference is enough to define the whole incredibly complex problem of consciousness, seeing a color versus reacting to a color. And you could potentially mimic absolutely perfectly human behavior without needing a consciousness. And so I find it very useful to have this color example, because really consciousness is almost a little luxury. You could really behave and navigate the world and, evolutionarily speaking, perform extremely well. Consciousness, why it's there? Why do you actually need to have this kind of internal eye looking at that and creating an experience? What is it exactly, this feeling versus this reacting, behaving? It's on one hand, I think it's often simpler. I like to think of consciousness prime as something simpler than something sometimes what's debated. Because even when you look at its simplest form, like experiencing pain versus reacting to pain, we have no idea how it works, what is required for it to emerge from a circuit, what its underlying biology. And that's why I found this example very powerful.
Yeah. I used to think that consciousness was a form of illusion based on the fact that you learn things and then you forget their origin, so you attribute it to yourself. But I moved on from that because it's a lot more complex. But you know, if we keep simple examples, if you learn about the poetry and then you forget that you learned it, or even the author that wrote this poetry, then you'll feel like you did it yourself, and then you attribute it to yourself, and then you start building up this kind of inner representation of a being conscious and able to create something new. Well, actually, you didn't create something new. So so on the one hand, if consciousness is an illusion, we just produce like random things that eventually happen to be new by making random association. On the other hand, if it's not an illusion and it's truly something, it is made for us to create original ideas and create original things through this processing and projection.
Do you think that all this ability to create association and new association, and could it exist without consciousness though? Like I feel that biologically, maybe that's the evolutionary trick that's been used, is this ability to, you know, this binding theory of like integrating all the information. This kind of tool to integrate may, in us by chance, leverage consciousness, but maybe a computer would not need that. What I mean is, I see it as an eye looking at all the, at the brain, creating this association, creating the experience, attributing things to self-experience or not. But this brain could well be absent, and this could, in theory, happen, at least on a theoretical level.
I hear you. That does question, what is it for? why is there consciousness? Glad we got it. Don't want to be ingrate and want it taken back. But what is it for? What is the meaning behind this? They must have a use, because otherwise natural selection will have like taken it out.
It feels like a fast way of integrating emotions but it's, I agree, in theory it could not exist, but I feel it's almost like a biological trick that was maybe a little more efficient than computing every detail of, like a biological trick to more rapidly parallel process emotions, what other thinking. But that's not an absolute requirement. I think a computer could well perform without it.
But if you take like so the perfect definition of psychopaths that feel like empty shells, you know, they will feel really like people that have not this consciousness and still like interacting, become expert at actually interacting, exchanging with people. So there will be people with that consciousness.
I think that psychopaths have consciousness, but they don't have, you know, the capacity for empathy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a higher level, like a specialized brain function,
Correct.
but that in theory doesn't need consciousness. But I think they have consciousness, just like I think many, even animals probably have consciousness.
I don't know.
Plants, as we established. Chris, you have a question as well.
Yeah, just to continue on the discussion, there are many. Well, the problem is the definition of consciousness. I mean, we're often coming back to it. Is like, what is consciousness? But it might also not be well, in all the definitions, it is so different that it might not be like one thing. And well, some theories are talking about emergent functions. So it's just when you have a complex enough system, you start developing functions that are more than the addition of its parts, of the parts of the system. And consciousness might, I mean, for me, I think it's that, but I'm not an expert in consciousness. But it would also mean that we probably have, it's probably a gradient of consciousness. So animals are conscious. I mean, for me, I don't think there is a doubt in that, because like in pretty much every definition of consciousness, you could find some of it in animals, and you couldn't really say that they are not conscious of themselves. I mean, they can learn, they can play, they can love, they can hate, they can like pretty much everything you could say about a human, you could say it to a lower level for a dog, for example. It's
well, but dogs, special thing, because have been selectively breeded to
still
match our expectation.
The size of their brain compared to ours, they are still able to do.
I know, but you take the C. elegans. It's a long break. Okay.
Yeah.
You know.
That's where I feel that when people refer to consciousness as this kind of higher level function that's highly integrative, I think it creates a debate that's a bit fuzzy, because consciousness could, so again, on one hand, this animal could perform very complex things, and human could perform very complex things in theory without consciousness, just like a computer. So the complexity of the performance doesn't require consciousness in principle. And at the other extreme, if we are able to biologically and conceptually understand what is the difference between pain and experience, or color and experience of color, it's such a simple question to which we have no answer.
Yeah.
That I feel it would really focus the debate. And in general, I think it's absolutely fascinating, all what's been discussed today. But I think in general in the field, if we could just answer that simple question, and this, I mean, plant could have, C. elegans could have, any animal, doesn't matter. But what is the difference between the experience of a very simple sensation, sensory perception, and the actual feeling of it? And we are stuck. We don't have an answer. So far,
because also consciousness is like a word that we put on things, but that's why I think the gradient, the idea of a gradient between forms of consciousness is good, because if we stop thinking of consciousness as something special and completely, because then we start thinking that only humans have it, but that I don't think that's true, and also like then you would humans that have brain disorders, then you, because if you think that it's only humans, it means that some humans with brain disorders wouldn't have consciousness, because at some point, if you remove them, I mean, from the disease, if you remove them from all the things that you attribute to consciousness, will you actually say that they are not conscious? I don't think anybody would say that a human is not conscious. I mean, except if they are in the coma.
That's exactly right. That's what I was going to say. But you know, there is also some, people have feelings.
But I think the confusion could come with the fact, I fully agree, and I think the confusion could come from the fact that there are subgroups. There is a consciousness of self, self-consciousness, there's consciousness of the other, of the state of the other, like these mirror neurons, or like added layer, or a specific example of how consciousness can apply. But if we come back to the notion of experience, there's no doubt that a dog has an emotion, has an experience, but at the same time, or most animals by the same token, at the same time, it's super hard to prove. is like, how do you experiment? How do you experimentally prove an experience? And it's almost impossible. I mean, if you really, really deeply think about it.
That's why it might be because we are trying to put a word on something that's not actually defined. So maybe it's also an impossible task to put consciousness in a box. It might come to that. It's just we are debating about so many different. We're not even talking about the same thing most of the time, and it might just be that we are struggling with language essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so like those 3 videos were not about defining what consciousness is. It was more about defining what consciousness is not. And in the present case, it is definitely not about knowledge or the way you can interact. It's really about something special that you experience. And that's why it's so hard to grasp. And that's the final experiment, which is you can actually remove any interaction with the environment and have this consciousness trapped into something that doesn't look conscious at all, and you cannot see any consciousness from it. I don't have the solution. I just thought that was a beautiful set of examples from these videos that actually help thinking about how complex the subject is and how can we, even try thinking about it. So made me want to try to find one day a thought experiment that might help people think about how little we know about what we think we study, which is the mind and the brain. But
this is great, by the way. But did you, sorry, because I missed the beginning, did you put some links? Can we find the links? Or?
Sorry, I just copy it again.
I'd love to.
It's really great, and the channel is really great. It's all about videos that summarize in 10-15 minutes some main ideas in philosophy or thinking, and they're like a very interesting sort of experiments on this channel.
So this is generally a shortcoming of Zoom, but if you join the meeting a little bit later, you can't see the links that we posted earlier. But just FYI, I usually copy them over to YouTube and they should be kept on the YouTube chat. So if you ever miss the beginning or can't find the links, they should always be on the channel.
Awesome.
Now, I hate to cut you short, but we're actually half an hour over time. But I deeply enjoyed the discussion. And clearly, given that it is the 3rd week we're discussing consciousness and we still come back to the same conclusions, that this is quite an exciting discussion I think we have going here. And thank you all for participating either online or in person here. And I'm gonna wish you an exciting week in science for now. Feel free to continue the discussion off screen. And I'm excited to see what you guys bring for next week and see if we still ride the consciousness train. Until then, have an exciting week in science. Thanks for being here and see you next Monday. Bye.